I'm happy to have you here for Tabor Talk tonight. Jill is going to be the most amazing co-pilot on the planet tonight because for whatever reason, I am currently not able to share my screen in Zoom, which has been a remarkable and not so great development. But be that as it may, we will soldier on. And so she's going to be my clicker as we go through while she's admitting people to the meeting at the same time. I mean, I know she dressed up as Wonder Woman on Be a Character Day on Friday, and she's earning her stripes right now for sure. Tonight, we have two topics to talk to you about. One is about parent-teacher conference information and signups and what you can expect from that process this year in the virtual realm. And then I'm going to spend some time going over kind of the process and proposals that are currently on the table as part of the Southeast Guiding Coalition process that's looking at boundaries and feeder schools for elementary and middle schools across Southeast Portland. There's been a lot of development in the last couple of weeks as the first drafts of proposals have come out. And I know that a lot of families have a lot of questions, and I want to just make sure that y'all are really prepared. Know how to read through the proposals so that you can provide feedback to the district as they consider those draft proposals and make changes and revisions to them. All right, Jill, if you'll hit the next slide when you're able to. Want to remind everybody of our digital norms for the evening. We're making sure our microphone is muted unless you're currently speaking. You're welcome to use the chat function to ask questions about the presentation content. I'll be really forthcoming and say I try not to look at it when I'm presenting to you guys because I get super distracted as I do so. So Jill is an amazing co-pilot and lets me know if there are things that I need to stop and look at in the chat. If you want to leave your video on, great. If not, totally get that as well. And I'm going to ask, as always, that we keep our actions and words appropriate and respectful, especially as we get engaged with the conversation about the Southeast Guiding Coalition. I know there's a lot of emotion, feeling, and opinions that come up as we look at those things. First on the docket tonight is information about our virtual parent-teacher conferences. As you all probably know, those conferences will be held on Monday, November 22nd and Tuesday, November 23rd. Those conferences will start beginning at 9 a.m. and we have time slots available clear up until the last conference that begins at 8:00 p.m. And that is on both of those days. Those are non-school days for our students. This year, our parent-teacher conferences are going to be virtual in the same type of format as last year. We have all of our teachers with slots that will be available, and those conference slots are 12 minutes per teacher. We ask that families limit their time to one slot per teacher if you choose to speak to someone. The only exception really are those families that need interpretation services because, as you can imagine, it takes even more time to have a conference when you're having to translate it between languages. And I know Jill and our counseling team have been working this week and making contact with those families that need interpretation and getting those scheduled. I also really want to make sure that you're aware that spots are limited in regards to parent-teacher conferences. I believe in total, each full-time teacher has 74 slots. And when you consider the fact that most of our teachers are up to 150 students that they see on a daily basis, they might get to see about half of their families. So when you're thinking about scheduling for parent-teacher conferences, please don't feel obligated to sign up to meet with every single teacher that your student has. I know that they would love a chance to get to meet you and talk to you about how amazing your child is because we all think your children are amazing. But when you think about who you need to talk to, I would prioritize those classes where your student may be having some academic concerns, where you want to know how to better support your student, where you need that connection with the teacher so that you can continue to partner in a really positive way. Sign up for those slots that make the most sense for you and don't worry about the rest. It's totally okay. The general signups for conferences will be open to families starting Friday, November 12th through Thursday, November 18th. I will be sending out directions to families on that Friday morning. There'll be pre-scheduled messages that go out via Remind and School Messenger, letting you know that those signups are open. As part of that information, parents are also going to receive directions on how to sign up and get the direct link for registration. We are using a different program this year and a different method than the year before. We're really hopeful that it will help streamline the process for families and be able to make it way more seamless. Once you sign up for your students' conferences, you'll get an email confirmation from the program directly. Once when you register, and once a couple of days before the conferences actually start, to remind you that, hey, this is coming. The email reminders should have the times of your conferences listed there, as well as the links to the different Google Meet sessions that you'll need to visit with each teacher. I want to make sure that I remind you as well that teachers are on a pretty tight schedule. And so that 12 minutes that is blocked for your conference is the time that teachers are anticipating talking to you. So if you show up late, it doesn't mean that our teachers actually have time to continue that conference later, because there's somebody else scheduled for the next 12 minutes immediately behind you. If you have things that don't get addressed in conferences, you can certainly follow up with teachers via email. I know a lot of times we get questions about, like, well, what do I need to come into conferences ready to ask about or discuss with my student? In 12 minutes, there's a lot of ground to cover. So I really encourage families to think ahead of time what it is that you would really like to focus on for your student. On this slide, I included some of the ideas that may be a focus point that you want to look at with your kiddo in any particular class. Maybe you want to figure out how to best be in touch between home and school. Maybe you want to help your kid with setting goals for themselves, or you're concerned about high school transition or what kind of support you can be doing at home. Maybe you have questions about homework or their mastery of specific standards, their work habits in class. There's so much that you can ask. I think it's really important to sit down ahead of time and look at all of those different areas and say, what do I really need to know about my student in each of the classes that we're going to talk through? And then be really direct with your students' teachers when you show up to those conferences and let them know, I would really like to be able to talk about these things for sure in our 12 minutes of time together. So we make sure that you get what you need out of the conference as well. I'm sure that while all of you are really excited about parent-teacher conferences, that there's a lot of hubbub and a lot of questions about what's happening with the Southeast Guiding Coalition, and probably one of the reasons why many of you are at this session tonight, though I know part of it is you wanted to see how well Jill does at navigating slides and admitting people to the meeting, because I'm always interested in that too. For those of you that are new to Tabor or new to this process, the Southeast Guiding Coalition is really a group of administrators and parents and community partners that are together to look at the boundaries and feeder paths and program locations for all of our schools across Southeast Portland. This group convened really for the first time last year in phase 1 of the process. That was really focused on opening Kellogg Middle School and redistributing those feeders to make sure that Kellogg was able to open this fall. While we go through this tonight, I really want to share with you all what this second phase of the Southeast Guiding Coalition is focused on, the process they're using, the goals they have, and the 2 current draft proposals that are currently up for consideration. I'm going to try to help provide you some information about the changes to the Southeast Portland feeder paths in both Proposal A and Proposal B. Such creative names, I know. I will say up front, I am by no means an expert in this because there's a lot of layers of detail in regards to the boundary changes, the feeder paths, and I think you'll see just in the brief overview that I give you that there's a lot of detail to dig into. I want to make sure that I call out for you all what those changes mean specifically for Mount Tabor Middle School as well. I do want to make sure that I'm clear that when we talk about the Southeast Guiding Coalition and our roles as members and what we're looking at, we're really looking at the totality of what's happening across Southeast Portland. So while it's really easy to get super hyper focused on what's happening to Mount Tabor in them. I think recognizing that there are changes being proposed all across Southeast Portland and trying to figure out what compromises and thoughts we need to center as we look at those changes is really super important. And of course, last of all, I want to make sure that you all know how you can provide direct feedback and learn more about these proposals in the coming weeks. I also want you to know that all of the information that I'm sharing with you tonight is widely available on the PPS Enrollment Balancing website, and you can find it at the link that is there on the screen, which reminds me I should probably drop, if I haven't already, or maybe Jill's doing it because I'm not looking at the chat because I'm not, it's both of us tonight. We'll drop a copy of the slide deck in for you all so that you can click through this with me if you'd like, because there's a lot of information to come. As I was saying earlier, there are a lot of different members to the Southeast Guiding Coalition. There's multiple groups that are represented. Some of those members of the Southeast Guiding Coalition are PPS district administrators that work at the district office in various capacities. All of our PPS principals in Southeast Portland of our elementary and middle schools that may be impacted are members of that group. We also have parent representatives for each one of those schools in Southeast Portland at the elementary and middle school level, and some representatives from community partners. I wanted to make sure that our parent community knows who our specific representatives are for Mount Tabor. We have 3 parent reps that are part of this work, Andrew, Maya, and Elizabeth. They each represent one of our different facets of our program here at Mount Tabor, with our Spanish DLI, our Japanese DLI, and our neighborhood program. I think it's important to note too that while I'm a member of the Southeast Guiding Coalition, as a PPS principal, our jobs are really to be there to listen, to be able to provide information to our families as they're navigating all of these important changes and thought processes. We're really there to be thought partners with them, but not to be there necessarily to advocate for our school community. I think you can probably appreciate the fact that the Mount Tabor school community is a diverse one with radically different needs and perspectives for all of our different programs. So to speak for the entirety of our school community is something that I can't actually do as one person, but I can surface the concerns and questions that come up as part of those considerations as well. I really encourage you all to reach out to your Southeast Guiding Coalition members from our school, from the program that best matches your role, and ask them questions or give them your perspective so they can bring that information forward. So when we started the phase 2 process, which really started in May of this year and has spanned clear through the summer and now here in the fall, we were doing so under the charge of the PPS school board, and they made, whoa, we're going on a ride through my slide deck. Thank you, Jill.
Sorry, Tanya.
You're all good. So the school board made and determined this charge back in February, and it's a 3-part charge. One is to convert Harrison Park, which is currently a K-8, to a full comprehensive middle school that serves grades 6, 7, and 8, and create the feeder patterns to do that so that Harrison Park Middle School can open in the fall of 2022. With that conversion, clearly they needed to find a site for Harrison Park's K-5 students, and they wanted to increase enrollment at Lane Middle School that really has been underutilized. Thank you, Elizabeth. I see your comment in the chat. Those of you that have the slide deck open, all of our reps' emails are tagged there as well, so you can click on them to email if you have questions or concerns. Thanks for being here tonight, Elizabeth. I really appreciate it. Jill, you ready for oh, there you go. So that was the major charge: converting Harrison Park to a middle school, finding a new home for the K-5 program and increasing enrollment at Lane. Last week during the Southeast Guiding Coalition, just prior to the district sharing with us 2 different draft proposals, they introduced the following guardrails or non-negotiables, saying that there's a lot in our charge as a Southeast Guiding Coalition, but here are some boundaries in regards to these are things that are going to happen. So one of those items was Harrison Park neighborhood K-5 students would move to the Clark building, which I believe currently houses the Creative Science School. They made that a non-negotiable because it really does make sense in regards to location to the current Harrison Park K-8 building and keeps kids close to home in a more neighborhood focused area. Creative Science School, as a result, would need to relocate, and there becomes a couple of different options based on what proposal you look at. It really becomes a K-8 focus option / neighborhood school. And you guys may be familiar with the model at Sunnyside. That's kind of the same model that the district in these 2 proposals is considering for Creative Science. In one of these proposals, Proposal A, Creative Science moves to Woodstock. And in Proposal B, Creative Science is located at Arleta. As that happens, the vast majority of the seats at that school, regardless of what the site is, are for neighborhood students, and that any remaining space at the school would take transfers that are wanting to become part of that kind of focus option. The other 2 guardrails or non-negotiables that the district presented to us was that our Chinese immersion programs would combine into a whole school or a whole DLI school. This was very specific in regards to this happening at a K-5 level, like an elementary whole DLI school. Those of us at Mount Tabor may be familiar with this kind of model because it's the same model that is used currently for our Japanese DLI grades K-5, which Richmond houses. As they're looking at Chinese immersion programs, in Proposal A, all of the Chinese immersion K-5 would be located at Bridger, and all of our K-5 Chinese immersion in Proposal B would be located at Woodstock. So you can see the difference with Woodstock in the picture. In one proposal, it's the home for Creative Science. In the other proposal, it is the home for the whole DLI school for Chinese immersion. There's a similar guardrail and non-negotiable in regards to our Spanish immersion programs as well, with those changing to whole DLI school models. In Proposal A, Lent has been identified as the only whole school DLI school. So all of our strands of Spanish immersion K-5 would relocate to Lent. There are 4 currently in Southeast. There's 1 at Atkinson, 1 at Bridger, 2 at Bridger and 1 at Lent currently. In Proposal B, it shakes out a little bit differently. Bridger becomes the whole school DLI, and that would be populated with our current Atkinson and I believe Bridger strands. And then Lent would keep their current DLI strand, but their neighborhood catchment would become a DLI program as well. This is much like what they did with Wrigler in Northeast Portland. Those families that live in the Lent neighborhood that would prefer their students not go to a DLI school would have the opportunity to attend, I believe, Marysville as the English neighborhood option. So those were kind of the 4 guardrails or non-negotiables that were presented to us on Thursday of last week. We're going to dig in a little bit to the 2 proposals that came forward. These documents are on the enrollment balancing website as well, but I feel like the visuals here at least give some sense about what is happening in each one of them. I think what's important to note here is that Harrison Park in draft Proposal A becomes the regional hub at the middle school level for all of our Spanish DLI and all of our Chinese DLI programs throughout the district. And it increases its enrollment with neighborhood and expanding that attendance area. Lane also sees some increase with changes of boundaries there as well. As I said before, Bridger and Lent become those regional hubs for the K-5 whole school Spanish and Chinese DLI, and Creative Science moves to Woodstock. That's a lot of change when you think about it. Our kiddos that currently are at Harrison Park K-8, the K-5 students would go to the Clark building in this model. So what does that mean? Like, who does it not affect, I guess, is probably the next best thing. And I think that's the next slide, Jill. So when you think about proposal A, this is the list of schools that are not impacted or not affected at all as a result of the changes that are part of that proposal. So you can see Richmond stays as our focus option DLI school for the Japanese immersion, and that the Japanese DLI stays here at Mount Tabor in this particular model. You can go ahead and go to the next one. Perfect. These are some of the moves that were talked about a little bit earlier. You'll notice that both the Atkinson and Bridger Spanish DLI go to Lent to join that program there, and that's an impact for us. You'll also note that at the middle school level for Mount Tabor and Kellogg, all of the Spanish DLI strands that are located in those two schools transfer to Harrison Park. Oops. So what I tried to do was go through and get really laser-like focused for you all as well to say, okay, so what does draft proposal mean for us here at Mount Tabor and our catchment area? There's some major changes in that Atkinson in its entirety no longer feeds to Tabor in this model. The Atkinson neighborhood program would feed to Hosford Middle School. The Atkinson Spanish DLI program feeds to Harrison Park. And with the movement of all of Atkinson from Mount Tabor, they move Vestal Elementary, which is currently feeding to Roseway Heights, to Mount Tabor Middle School instead. With all of that shuffling that takes place, they have an anticipated enrollment at Mount Tabor Middle School. Like if that change were to happen right now, we would be sitting at 617 students. It's about 30 to 40 students shy of where we're currently at. We're right around the 640, 650 mark here at Mount Tabor right now. So we see a little bit of contraction here at Mount Tabor, but it does help us with our building utilization rate, which those of you that were part of these conversations last year know that our last year numbers had our building utilization at over 100%. I believe with this proposal, we're back down in the 80s. So we might actually have some breathing room in the hallways and have some classrooms that are open instead of trying to figure out where we can house people with offices and those sorts of things. So that is proposal A in a very brief and quick nutshell. There's way more to it. Proposal B, you'll see some key differences. Harrison Park and Kellogg both become Spanish DLI middle schools. Lane becomes the regional hub for Chinese DLI. Chinese DLI right now at the middle school level is currently at Hosford. And then for elementary schools, as I talked about before, Bridger becomes the home of a Spanish DLI. Woodstock becomes a whole school for Chinese DLI. And Lent becomes this neighborhood Spanish DLI program. Creative Science moves to Arleta and absorbs that neighborhood program as well. You'll see the changes also over to the side that kind of breaks that scenario down. Jill, you're doing such an amazing job. Thank you. Again, you can see schools that are unaffected, Richmond and the Japanese DLI placement here at Tabor, both remain as they currently are. You can see there are some other schools, again, that are not impacted by these changes. As far as K5 and K8 moves that may be of interest to you all, our Atkinson feeder of Spanish DLI would move to Bridger. And I believe our both of those feeders, I'm going to make sure I'm not saying this wrong, because I probably am, because there's so much information to remember right now. But I'm pretty sure that our Spanish DLI here from Tabor and the Atkinson, so hold on. The Mount Tabor Spanish DLI program feeds to Harrison Park. And our Atkinson, no, that's right. I'm trying to remember where our Atkinson neighborhood goes to, and I can't remember off the top of my head. I think it may go to Kellogg, but I could be totally and completely wrong. Maybe the next slide tells me. It may not. I figured this out earlier this evening. There we go. Atkinson neighborhood feeds to Kellogg Middle School. There we go. I knew it was in there somewhere. The DLI continues to feed to Harrison Park. The part that's really difficult about Proposal B for us that doesn't really have a solution at the moment is that the entirety of Atkinson moves from our building, but no new feeders in Proposal B are identified to move into Mount Tabor. And as you can imagine, that really does make a drastic change to our enrollment here at Mount Tabor Middle School. And I think that number is wrong. I know that number is wrong because I typed it wrong. The anticipated enrollment at Mount Tabor Middle School with these changes is actually going to be 481 students, not 681. Let me see if I can change that while Jill's on this slide so it's actually accurate. That's a pretty significant change for us. And I know that the district is planning on, is trying to make sure that all of our middle schools have at least 500 students in them, because we recognize that under that number can have a pretty serious impact on the programs that are able to be offered and staffing in those buildings as well. When we talked about this as a principals group, I know they're looking at adjusting boundaries in Northeast, that many of those schools are experiencing overcrowding like we're used to here at Mount Tabor. And so we actually may end up absorbing some students and programs from the Northeast quadrant of the city, since we are one of the most Northeast situated Southeast middle schools. That makes zero sense to say. We're more toward the north than many of the other middle schools in Southeast. And so it might make sense for us to absorb there. But currently that number stands at 481 students if that change were to be made right now. There's a lot of information clearly about all of these proposals, and I want to make sure that you know where to find them. The first link here is a link to the current draft proposals. They're all in one giant PDF that you can load. The images that we've been looking at tonight come directly from that link. So the things that you've seen should look familiar. Under summary stats, if you want to get really deep and see how many students currently populate each one of the different strands at each one of the different schools, and how each of those proposals impact the enrollment at schools, and in all sorts of different demographics and categories. You can click on those two links for Proposal A and Proposal B. It'll take you to a spreadsheet where you can look at all of the data. I think what's really important though, I know Jill and I had a session this morning out in the parking lot in the bitter cold and wind with many of our Spanish speaking families, is that the district really needs to hear feedback from our groups that are impacted, because that feedback really does adjust proposals and thought processes as we go through this. As I said before, these are two drafts that they've come forward with for specifically community feedback. At this point, the district has identified several different listening sessions and an open house to go over in more depth these current draft proposals to specifically get feedback from our Southeast Portland community before we begin making changes to those proposals. They want to know what you think. especially from our BIPOC families, from our families that are served in our DLI programs. They want to hear your opinions about this. So there are a number of listening sessions that they have planned. I believe the dates that are listed on this screen may be tentative, and they don't have the links yet for those discussion sessions posted. These can be found at that PPS enrollment balancing website that I gave you earlier in the presentation. So I'd ask that you check back and figure out which of these sessions might fit your family best. The open house is open for everyone in all groups. Typically, it starts with like a 30-minute presentation, kind of like tonight, with the big picture overview of the different proposals. And then they bust everybody out into breakout rooms where they can answer questions and people can give comment as well. I really wanted to make sure that you guys had a chance to see the proposals up front, because I know there's a lot of information in them. There's a lot of processing to do with those proposals that I know the Guiding Coalition has been going through as well. And I just want to make sure that you're prepared and thoughtful so that when you get to the point where you're able to give feedback in those listening sessions or at the open house, you're really targeted in what you're able to say and the questions that you need to have answered from the district.
Tanya, can you talk about how the proposed changes of us losing Atkinson and how that would affect funding and staffing?
Clearly, losing a third of your student body out of a school is going to have a pretty significant impact on funding and staffing. And I don't think that the district is far enough through this drafting proposal process to give us really complete answers. I know last year when we went through this process and one of our elementary schools in Southeast was not going to be converted to a K-5, and then we're going to continue in that K-8 model. There was a very explicit request from that community that if that were to happen, that they would need additional teaching staff to make sure that they gave their students those important elective and enrichment opportunities. I would hope, and this is my hope, I haven't been promised anything if that were to go through because we're still in the drafting phase, that the district would consider how we could continue to preserve staffing and programs here at Mount Tabor. However, I know that as different programs leave our building, staff also is reallocated, oftentimes moving with the students to wherever their new program lands. So for example, if the Spanish DLI program moves from Mount Tabor to Harrison Park, as it shows up in both of these proposals, most likely our Spanish DLI staff would follow our students to that new school. Obviously, there'd be other staff that are important that would go as well in regards to being able to support those populations. So we might see, some of our staff disperse, but a loss of a third of our student body would probably see a quarter to a third of our staffing here at Mount Tabor change as well. What the full implications of that would look like, we won't know until things are completely settled.
Tanya, can you talk about how this might impact high school feeding patterns?
I would be happy to talk about that because it was one of the questions that came up in our session on Thursday of last week. Margaret Calvert, who is the assistant superintendent the regional assistant superintendent for secondary schools, said that next year, so the 22-23 school year, the district is planning to look at district-wide high school feeder patterns. They were pretty explicit to us that we are simply focused at this point in looking at middle school and elementary feeder paths and boundaries and not considering high school at all. It hasn't come up as a source of conversation. It's been pretty clear that that's for a different guiding coalition that is not in our charge for next year.
Do you think, let me get back to the questions for a second. Are Sunnyside and Laurelhurst K-8s out of bound or scope of this phase in the guiding coalition?
At this point, I haven't seen in these two drafts of the proposals anything that impacts those two schools. I don't know that that necessarily means that they're out of bounds in regards to what conversation could be had about those particular buildings. They haven't come up in these proposals, however. I think a lot of times, like, it's like, it may not be in this draft, but it doesn't mean it won't be in future drafts as we consider.
Those are all the questions for now.
Excellent. I'm happy to continue to entertain questions, though I'm sure if you're like me, the first time I saw these proposals, I felt like my brain was about to implode or explode. I'm not sure which direction. But if you have questions that we can answer about the specifics of the proposals or the listening sessions or the process or how long this is going to take, I'm happy to answer what I know at this point.